G'day knuckleheads, Uncle Knackers here. Quick question, have you ever tried to pull apart a pallet? Try saying that fast 10 times. Have you tried to pull apart a pallet? Have you ever tried to pull apart a pallet? Have you tried to pull apart a pallet? Have you ever tried to pull apart? Hopeless. If you've ever tried to pull apart a pallet, got it right that time, you'll know that it's not that easy, especially if you're trying to preserve the timber and you don't want it to split. Just bashing away at it and levering it, especially on the ends, will just cause the board to split. Now I'm guessing that most of us don't have an actual designated pallet prier sitting around in the garage. So depending on what tools you have available, I'm going to show you a couple of techniques on how to remove these boards easily and finish up with a lot more usable timber. Now the first thing you need to know when I'm pulling apart an old pallet is that I like to work at waist height. That way I'm not bending over and straining the old back. And to achieve that, you can either put the pallet on a couple of sawhorses, or in this case, I've got the old outside table. Now the first technique I'm going to show you, which is my favourite by the way, involves a power tool called the reciprocating saw, also known as a sawzall. This has got a 9-inch blade, a 12-inch blade is also good, and it's a multi-purpose blade, which means that it can be used for metal and timber. And what you do with this is that you put it between the slat and the stretcher, and it'll cut all those nails off, releasing the board. And the reason why I really like it is that you can salvage the entire length of the board, and you can also retain those beautiful rustic nail holes, which I love so much. Now I often make a feature of those old nail holes in a lot of my projects, just like on this wine rack. You can see on the ends there how those old nail holes really lend themselves to that rustic feel, and I don't want to lose that. And if you want to make that wine rack, by the way, I'll leave a link to the video in the description box below. Before I start cutting with a reciprocating saw, I like to get an old chisel, one that you don't mind digging up a little bit, and driving it between the slat and the stretcher. Give it a couple of hits, and that'll create a gap between the slat and the stretcher, giving the reciprocating saw a nice clean run. And as always, when using power tools, don't forget your eye protection, some earmuffs and some gloves. Let's do this. How easy was that? And that took me about 1 minute to do both sides. With those top nails cut and those slats are free, do the same thing to those bottom slats. All right, with that cut, all you have to do now is remove the stretcher. Too easy. And do the same for the other side. Okay, got rid of that stretcher. Now all that's left to do is tackle the middle. With the sides now free, all we need to do is remove the slat from that center stretcher. Now you could get your reciprocating saw again and just cut those nails off, but every now and then you might want to keep that piece of timber, that stretcher, nail free, and to do that we need to pry this off rather than shear those nails off. And to do that, just grab yourself a jemmy bar or a flat bar and drive it between the slat and the stretcher with a couple of good hits. And then just pry that up. And there's your board, totally intact, and the stretcher in the middle hasn't got any nails in it. Now to remove those nails, just tap them out with your hammer, and to remove the ones that you've cut off, just get yourself a nail punch and punch those out, and then pull the heads. That is too easy, and my back is feeling great. Now the second technique that I'm going to show you is just as easy as the first one, if not easier, but there are a couple of drawbacks to it which I'll talk about later. But the principle is to cut a line right down the length of that pallet, just on the inside of the stretcher there, with a circular saw or a jigsaw. So you do it to this side, you do it to that side, which frees these boards up, and then you just pry off those center slats. I should also mention too that I've clamped this pallet down to the table so it doesn't move around. Now if you want to make it a bit easier, you can mark a line down the inside of that stretcher. Alright, now that the board's free, we can remove it from that center stretcher. So as before, grab your pry bar or your flat bar, drive it in and lever these slats off. Too easy. Now with this side done and the boards have been denailed, all you need to do is turn the pallet over and repeat the process. Now like I said before, there's a downside to this method, and that is that the board is now shorter than what it normally would be. So if you were planning on repairing a pallet, the board's going to be too short. You've also lost the integrity of those old rustic nail holes. But if that doesn't bother you, then this is a great method. Oh no! My poor old hammer just died. I've had this for 20 years. The old backup hammer. So there you go. Two really easy ways on how to disassemble a pallet without breaking your back. Great tip, Knackers! And don't go just yet, because I've got a really cool trick for you. So here's the trick. Actually, it's more of a technique. But see that old pallet over there? It's as heavy as lead. And to drag that into the backyard would be absolute murder. So the easiest way I've found to move an old heavy pallet is not to drag it, but to roll it. Like that. Too easy.